He knows our God is a anytime God. Not just an on-time God. You go to Him anytime. Amen. Thank the Lord. If you have your Bibles, I want you to turn with me again to the book of Psalms. We are continuing our journey through the Psalms. And tonight, I'm going to do a little different than what we did last week. Last week I only pulled something out of Psalm chapter 1. We did the first three chapters in our reading. But tonight I'm going to try to go verse by verse. I know it's 3 chapters. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but try to go verse by verse. And I think this will be beneficial as we go through Psalms 4 through 6. I pray and I trust that you have read that. I'm not going to read all those, but I will read chapter number 4 on behalf of your hearing. Psalm 4, we're going to actually deal with 4, 5, and 6. But Psalm 4, beginning at verse 1. It is a psalm of David, and he says, "Hear me when I call, O God of my righteousness. Thou hast enlarged me when I was in distress." I want you to note that. Thou hast enlarged me when I was in distress. "Have mercy upon me and hear my prayer. O ye sons of men, how long will ye turn my glory into shame? How long will ye love vanity and seek after leasing?" Selah. "But know that the Lord hath set apart him that is godly for himself. The Lord will hear when I call unto him. Stand in awe and sin not. Commune with your own heart upon your bed and be still." Selah. "Offer the sacrifices of righteousness and put your trust in the Lord. There be many that say, Who will show us any good? Lord, lift thou up the light of thy countenance upon us. Thou hast put gladness in my heart, more than in the time that their corn and their wine increased. I will both lay me down in peace and sleep, for thou, Lord, only makest me dwell in safety." I'm just going to stop there. Like I said, we'll continue with the other 2 chapters. Well, most commentators believe that David wrote Psalm 4 when he was dealing with the insurrection of his own son, Absalom. As been stated before, there seems, when you read the book of Psalms, there seems to be a psalm for every side. A psalm for every sigh. Everything that would cause a sigh in our soul, everything that would cause a sigh in our heart, there seems to be a psalm that addresses it. Every hurt, every anguish, every pain, every situation. But I would say there's not only a psalm for every sigh, there is a psalm for every high. Every good thing, everything that for joy to be in our life, and gladness and rejoicing and celebration. There's also a psalm for that. And sometimes you get the mixture of both. You see them really going from a sigh to a high, where you see God begin to, as they begin to sing and begin to worship, begin to write and begin to communicate this. What you begin to see is how that it all begins to turn around for them. It all begins to turn around, and they begin to go from the negative to the positive. And so there's so much wisdom, so much application really to the Psalms that I really trust that as we get in this throughout the year, that this will be a rich study. So I want to begin going verse by verse here and look at verse 1 again of Psalm 4. He says, "Hear me when I call, O God of my righteousness. Thou hast enlarged me when I was in distress." If this was when Absalom was revolting and was coming against David, then I want you to understand that when your own son, your own family turns against you, when you're dealing with those kinds of relational issues and problems. But notice what he says. He asks, he said, "Hear me when I call, O God of my righteousness." But notice this line. He said, "Thou hast enlarged me when I was in distress." Thou hast enlarged me when I was in distress. When was he enlarged? When everything was good? When he was on top of the mountain? When everything wonderful, when everything was rosy, when everything was joyous, when everybody was in agreement, when everybody seemed to be on the same page, when things were moving forward, when he got the promotion or he got the raise or he got this or... No, that's not when he was enlarged. He said, you have enlarged me when I was in distress. How many knows that God can take the negative times of our lives and do a positive work in our life? And so he says here something very critical. He said, hear my call, hear my prayer, hear me when I call, O God of my righteousness. Thou hast enlarged me. He makes this statement. He makes this declaration. Thou hast enlarged me when I was in distress. Have mercy upon me and hear my prayer. This is important because we sometimes want to avoid the distressing situations, and we definitely don't want to create them, and we don't want to stay in them longer than we were meant to. But the truth is that sometimes the times of tension and of distress can be very beneficial if we respond the right way. Sometimes it can get, I've always thought about this, being not a very great musician, but knowing a little bit about a guitar, those strings are not just put on there at random. There is, for the things to sound right, there is a specific measure of tension or distress that those strings are under. If the tension or the distress is off, it doesn't matter if you hit the right note, it's going to sound off. Because the amount of stress or tension or distress is not correct. And how many knows that I'm glad that if you let Him, God will control your tuning pegs. See, when all we begin to spit out is sourness and bitterness and all this, we ain't been letting God tune the pegs. And what we need to do, because we'll hit a sour note. Don't look at your neighbor, it's going to ruin things. Be a sour note. But what happens is when you begin to do like David, even when your own flesh and blood may be against you, and you begin to call out to the Lord, He said, you know what? I feel God tuning me. I feel even in this negative place, I feel God tuning me. And by the way, a tuning is not something that happens one time and then it's over. You have to do it like all the time. The weather affects it, the temperature affects it, the age of the strings affects it. A lot of things affect whether that thing's in tune or not, and a lot of things affect the tuning of our life. I don't know how we'll get through 3 chapters. I can just tell you that for most of us, it would be a great thing if we'd be able to look back and say, God enlarged me in my distress. He tuned my strings. He tuned my pegs. He was in control. And what I could have sounded sour. I could have sounded bitter. I could have sounded bad. But because I went to the Lord with it, He began to put a tune, a song. He began to turn some things in my life. You have enlarged. It's like building muscle. Building muscle comes when you kind of break it down with weightlifting. So you break it down so that it rebuilds itself stronger. And it's kind of like that in our life. So He says, hear me when I call. You've enlarged me when I was in distress. Then He turns His attention and says in verse 2, O ye sons of men, how long will ye turn my glory into shame? How long will ye love vanity and seek after leasing? Now notice this. He starts out by talking to God. Hear me when I call, God, verse 1. Then verse 2, O ye sons of men. So now He turns His attention to those that are afflicting Him, to those that He's having trouble with, to those that He's having issue with. There's a pattern here. There's an order here is what I'm trying to say. There's an order. He turns His attention to His enemies, but only after He has talked to God about the situation. And this is always the right recipe. You should always talk to God. You should talk up to God before you speak out to other people. You should talk up to God. In other words, you should pray before you begin to speak to others. So He calls out to God, and then He addresses His enemies, and He says, how long will you turn my glory into shame? How long will you love vanity and after leasing. How many knows this? Who knows this? And by the way, the word leasing there doesn't talk about a car or an apartment. It's a word that means falsehood. It's a word that talks about deception, even giving people false hope. I'll talk about it a little bit more in a minute. I'll go back to it. He said, "Oh, sons of men," he said, "God, I want you to hear me." He said, "But sons of men, how long are you going to do this?" And then he says in verse 3, watch, he said, "But no." But no. And how many knows that when you are facing trouble, many things seem to be uncertain? But our standing with God does not need to be one of those things that are uncertain. He said, "But know that the Lord hath set apart him that is godly for himself. The Lord will hear when I call unto him." Now I want to tell you that when we're facing trouble and many things seem to be uncertain, I told Lori today, this morning in my reading, I don't even know, I can't even remember where I read it, but I was reading, and I read this, and she was talking about her dad today, and I told her this. I said, "I just read this morning," and I said, "I think this fits because they really didn't know about her dad and such," and I said this is the line that I read this morning, that our unknowns are well known to God. Our unknowns are well. I don't know. It's so much unknown. I don't know. How many knows that God never has to say, "I don't know"? It is well known. Even things that are unknown to us are well known to God. And I said, so you guys have confidence that even though you don't know, and maybe doctors don't know, the unknowns are well known to God. Very, very fitting, I think, for many of us. And so David knew that Absalom had turned against him, and others may have joined in. And that makes many aspects of his life uncertain. But when you need peace in uncertain times, you have to turn to what you can be certain about. And that is, you can know that the Lord has set you apart for himself, and that the Lord will hear you when you call unto him. One thing you can be certain about, you can know that the Lord is with you, and that he has set you apart for his purposes. He'll hear you. He'll hear you when you call. And then he says this. He says, standing on, I know I'm going quick, but I got a long way to go. He says, stand in awe and sin not. Tell them I'm preaching right now. Keep talking. Stand in awe and sin not. Commune with your own heart upon your bed and be still. Selah. That word Selah, we'll see a whole lot. It was really talked about a musical. It's a musical term that really meant an instrument, an instrumental section where you would pause, you would think, you would consider what's just been said. And so if we go back, he said, look, I was enlarged when I was in distress. The sons of men are turning my glory into shame. They love vanity. They seek falsehood against me. But I know that the Lord has set me apart for himself, and the Lord will hear when I call to him. So this is what he said. He said, I'll stand in awe. I'll commune with my heart upon my bed, and I will be still. How many knows that when trouble comes, it tries to grab our focus? Tries to grab our focus. I've noticed that trouble has a good grip. Trouble has good grip. And it can really begin to grab you even before you know it, even before you realize that things will grab onto you and latch onto you, and they don't like to let go, and they will not let go willingly and of their own accord. And we must be intentional about forcing our focus back on the Lord. Too many people stand in awe of their trouble when they have to pull their focus back to stand in awe of the Lord. One way that you know that you're getting off track is when your trouble looks bigger than your God. I'm not saying that you sin or backslid. I'm saying that you're off track. Something's wrong. You got the wrong perspective. You're looking at it wrong. And so he said, stand in awe. We should not stand in awe of our trouble. We should stand in awe of our God. And when we lay down upon our bed, when trouble is present, you know what happens. We normally don't commune with our heart. We normally can commune with our head. And we got thousands of thoughts going through our head. What if? What if? If this, if that. What if this happens? What if that happens? Why this? How am I supposed to handle this? Why would they do this? I don't understand. God, why would you let all this rolling through our head? But he said, I'm not going to commune with my head. He said, I'm urging you to move beyond your head and to commune with your heart. You got to go to what you know in your heart because sometimes what you know or don't know in your head is not enough. It's not sufficient. So you got to go to what you know in your heart, what we know about God. Stand in awe, he said, commune with your heart and be still. I said it before, don't become the devil's fidget spinner. Don't let him just spin you around and twirl you around just for his own entertainment. But to be still and to know that he is God. And verse 5, he says, offer the sacrifices of righteousness and put your trust in the Lord. Do you see how all of this, piles up and how it all stacks up? He said, my son is rebelling against me, but you enlarged me even when I was in distress. Even though people are trying to speak falsehood and do things against me, I know that you set me apart. I know what you have done in me. I know what you want for my life. And I will call unto you, and I know you'll hear me, and I will stand in awe of you, Lord. And I will commune with my heart upon my bed. I will be still. And then he says, offer the sacrifices of righteousness and put your trust in the Lord. In other words, he said, I will continue to worship. I will continue to praise you. I will continue to glorify you. In other words, he says, keep worshiping and keep trusting in Jesus. Don't let your trouble dictate and determine your spiritual practices. This is too often what we do. We let trouble dictate. Well, I got all this going on. I really don't feel like praying. Well, all these people talking against me, I don't feel like picking up the word. You can't let trouble dictate your spiritual practices. You keep on praying, you keep on reading, you keep on worshiping, you keep on trusting. Look what he said, offer the sacrifices of righteousness and put your trust in the Lord. Then verse 6, he says, there be many that say, who will show us any good? But Lord, lift thou up the light of thy countenance upon us. And he said, there's a lot of people saying, hey, is anybody going to be kind to us? Has everybody turned against us? There's nobody left who's on my side. There were questions arising from among their own ranks. Some of the people surrounding David were doubting that anybody was left who was on their side and who would support them. So David hears this and he said, many people are wondering if anybody will show kindness to us. He said, but don't look at their faces. Look to the Lord's face. He said, Lord, would you let the light of your countenance shine down upon us? Would you let the light of your countenance shine upon us? He said there, Lord, lift thou up the light of thy countenance upon us. How many knows that people's countenance oftentimes reflects their feelings? You can tell what's going on inside by looking at their face. Yeah. And they look at them right now. And what happens a lot of times is their emotions are dictated by their circumstances. And everybody here must have been dark and drab and grim, but the Lord's countenance, how many knows this? The Lord's countenance does not change with the changing of our circumstances. And he didn't call on his best men. He didn't call on his best soldiers. He didn't call in the people in his court and say, hey, would somebody come in here and smile at me so I know I got a friend? You know what he said? He said, Lord, I got my eyes on you. Lord, let the light of your countenance, because I know that if anybody's countenance is lightened, is bright, I know, Lord, that it's you, because you are not darkened by the circumstances of this world. And even when my own countenance is affected by circumstances and problems and difficulties, he said, I know, Lord, that your face stays the same. So would you let the light of your countenance, would you let it be lifted up upon us? And it must have happened because look at verse 7. He said, thou, let me back up a minute. Because here's something that when you talk about this, about the light of his countenance, the Jews in the Old Testament, one of the things the priest's blessing, as it was called, would say, may the Lord cause his face to shine upon you. It was basically a declaration of the Lord showing you favor. And so here's what David was praying. David was saying, he was saying, Lord, would you show us your favor even when it seems we are out of favor with everybody else? Because I want to tell you something. The favor that really makes the difference in your life is not the favor of any man.
Amen.
It is the favor of God. When God favors you, he can bring you into favor with people who would have never favored you. So here's the deal. Don't spend excess energy trying to gain people's favor. Because if you have the favor of God, he can give you favor with men. And so you say, God, would you let your favor be on my life? Now, of course, we want the favor of men. We want people to favor us. But we should have that priority of seeking the favor of God beyond and as a priority above and first before the favor of men. Because that's something that God can bring us into, that God can work out. And it must have happened because look what he says here. He says in verse 7, thou hast put gladness in my heart. Are you kidding me? Your son is causing an insurrection. Your son is challenging your position. Your son has turned against you. But he said, but I done got along with God, and I just kept on worshiping. I got my eyes on him, and I began to pray, and I began to offer sacrifices. And he said, I began to do all that, and people wasn't nice to me, and people didn't favor me. He said, but when I turned my attention to the Lord, he said, thou hast put gladness in my heart. He said, this gladness in my heart is more than in the time that their corn and their wine increase. In other words, it's not about my harvest. He said, it's not about what's come my way. He said, you have put gladness in my heart. This is what? This is not connected to a change in circumstance. This is a change of David's condition inwardly, while the circumstance was still bad outwardly. That's when you know it's supernatural. That's when you know it's of the Lord, because the circumstance ain't changed, but something in me's changed. And I'm going to rejoice. And I'm going to be glad. And he said here, thou hast put gladness in my heart more than in the time that their corn and their wine increased. So here's what he said in verse 8. I will both lay me down in peace and sleep. Not stress, sleep. Not toss and turn, sleep. I will both lay me down in peace and sleep. For thou, Lord, only makest me dwell in safety. He said, I'm going to go to sleep because God's got this. I'm going to go to sleep because God's got my back. I'm going to go to sleep. Listen, he said, I will both lay me down in peace and sleep, for thou, Lord, only makest me dwell in safety. When the Lord touches your heart, you can lay down in peace, not in panic.
In faith, not in fear. In hope, not in dread. And when you lay down, you can sleep instead of stress. Amen. And we as believers need to learn that resource of the Lord. And we need to learn that we can lay upon our bed and rest and not wrestle. We oftentimes do far more wrestling than we do resting. And we're wrestling with questions, and we're wrestling with doubts, and we're wrestling with fears. And we need to rest and not wrestle. In that old hymn, What a Friend We Have in Jesus, there's a line there that says, "Oh, what peace we often forfeit. Oh, what needless pain we bear. Why? All because we do not carry everything to God in prayer." David understood that. How much time do we waste with pointless conversations and considerations about negative possibilities? They ain't even happened yet, but negative possibilities and potential problems. They're not problems yet, but potentially a problem. And many of them never occurred, and we wasted so much time and energy. How much better to simply cast our care on the Lord and pour our hearts out to Him and rest in His goodness. And so here he closes by saying, I'm going to rest. This is an evening psalm, if you will. And Psalm 5, that is also a psalm of David, is not an evening psalm, but a morning psalm. He's going to talk about talking to God in the morning. So let me read a few verses here. Verse 1, "Give ear to my words, O Lord. Consider my meditation. Hearken unto the voice of my cry, my King and my God. For unto thee will I pray. My voice shalt thou hear in the morning, O Lord." Notice he's making a statement. He's making a commitment. "My voice shalt thou hear in the morning, O Lord. In the morning will I direct my prayer unto thee." What? "And will look up." I will look up. How many knows we spend a lot of time looking around and looking down? And one of the things about a time of prayer is it's a time for us to reorient ourselves to looking up. Instead of just looking around, and instead of looking down, or even looking within, it is a time to look up, to get our eyes back on the Lord. Many times a time of prayer is not just about what you're saying, it's about where your heart is going. It's about where your heart is postured. And so he says here, he said, "My voice," verse 3, "my voice shalt thou hear in the morning." He's talked about his words, he's talked about his meditations, the voice of my cry. And he really talks here about the method of prayer and the timing of prayer. And please understand, when I talk about this, I'm talking about, how many knows this, that there should be, and can be in our life anyway, systematic prayer and spontaneous prayer. In other words, there should be times that we say, this is my time of prayer. This is my time with God. I am going to set an appointment, set aside a time. Whether that's every day, every morning, every whatever, whatever, but it's systematic. You structured it in. But then, knows that there are things that come our way that we didn't see coming, and at any time, like I said, He's an anytime God. I remember when my mom got sick the first time 10 years ago, 10 and a half years ago almost. I prayed that morning when my dad had called me. I had already prayed, right, systematically. But when he called and said, "I'm having to take your mom to the hospital," I didn't pray. I didn't stop to pray systematically. I prayed spontaneously. And I prayed while I was putting my shoes on. I prayed while I was driving the car. And I prayed. So when I say this about systematic, please understand what I'm saying. We can pray anytime. We can call on God anytime. Okay? But the truth is that there should be times in our life where we make this systematic, where we have a time, where we have structured time for God. let me say this too. He said, you will hear the voice. Notice he said, hearken to the voice of my cry. And he says, my voice shalt thou hear in the morning, O Lord. In the morning will I direct my prayer unto thee. Now, let me talk about two things. One, a method, and one timing. Effective prayer, by the way, is not about volume. Effective prayer is not about volume. But I will make, if you'll allow me, with understanding, to make an observation and even a confession. I get up in the mornings very early and try to spend time with God, read Scripture, read some devotional. Maybe I have a book or two that I'm reading. I'll read some of that. I pray for the church, pray for my family, pray for you, pray for God to lead God, etc., etc. Okay, pray for things that's on my heart. Okay, but I've noticed something. Okay, I've noticed something. Because sometimes it's so early in the morning, I'm trying to be respectful and trying to not, cause Winnie to have a heart attack in the back room. But I've noticed something, that when I'm in a setting where I'm more quiet and if I can say it this way, where I kind of whisper my prayer or even pray in my heart, I found that it's a lot easier, maybe not really easy, but a lot easier for my mind to wander. If I get quiet, I'm just like, and all of a sudden the refrigerator, because at that time of morning you hear everything. The refrigerator kicks on. Oh, refrigerator. And then something else happens in the drink, and then somebody gets up and they start their week. Whoa! What's that? So the observation is this: there are times that I pray like that, and then there's times that when I come into the office or I'm trying to do that, I try to set aside some time where I can come in here and y'all don't want to hear me when I pray. I'm scared to live in daylight today sometimes. Why do I do it? Not because it's more effective, not because God hears it more, but it seems like I can stay on track better. Okay? I can stay on track better. That didn't sound good. So blessed Jesus. There's something about speaking our prayers out loud that changes the nature and the feel of it and helps some of us to focus more. Now here's the time though. There are several reasons why I'm a proponent of praying in the morning when we get up. I know what time it is, I'm trying to hurry. But there are several reasons why I'm a proponent of morning prayer, devotions, quiet time, whatever you want to call it. Let me just put it out like this, okay? I can give all kinds of things. When the Israelites journeyed through the wilderness, the Bible said that God fed them with manna. And the manna was available in the morning. Now, there's a principle, okay? The manna was available in the morning. But after the sun came up, Exodus 16:31, after the sun came up, it melted. And you know what I found? I found that if I don't go get the manna before the sun comes up, before my day gets started, my golden opportunity to take time with God has melted away. So I am a big proponent of trying to give God an early point. Listen, you may have 15 minutes, you may have 30 minutes. There's no set time. That's between you and the Lord, okay? And let Him lead you in that. Let Him lead you in that. Sometimes people say, oh, you ought to dedicate an hour to God. Well, let God lead you in that. Okay, let God. You're not under any pressure, okay? No legalistic pressure on how long you have to spend. You let God lead you in that. Okay? But I'm a big proponent because I don't want that opportunity melting away for me to receive, because Lord knows that I need His wisdom, I need His guidance, I need His strength. And so I'm a big proponent of letting God hear my voice in the morning and of listening to hear His voice in the morning. And so, amongst many other reasons, I'm a proponent of morning prayer. However, we just saw that He talked about in laying on His bed, He's going to commune with His heart. He's He's going to sort of, go back over this and ruminate on what he's learned through the day and what he knows about God. So please understand, systematic and spontaneous. And I'll leave that there. But he says, in the morning I'll direct my prayer to thee and will look up. This is so important because we spend so much time looking around, looking down. We need to be intentional and have structured times when we can look up and refocus our hearts and minds on the Lord. So watch this. Then he says this in verse 4. For thou art not a God that hath pleasure in wickedness, neither shall evil dwell with thee. The foolish shall not stand in thy sight. Thou hatest all workers of iniquity. Thou shalt destroy them that speak leasing. Again, there's that word, that falsehood, that deception. The Lord will abhor the bloody and deceitful man. But as for me, I will come into thy house in the multitude of thy mercy, and in thy fear will I worship toward thy holy temple. Let's go back to verse 4. You're not a God that takes pleasure in wickedness. This is very important in this day and hour. He is not a God who takes pleasure in wickedness. In a day when suicide bombers are killing people in the name of God, or people killing workers at abortion clinics in the name of God, or supposed Christians like those of Westboro Baptist who celebrate the death of soldiers, and people are doing things in the name of God that are wicked and evil of themselves. He said, you are not a God that has pleasure in wickedness. None of that is pleasing to the Lord. None of that. And he says here, even those people try to justify their actions as righteous and God-honoring, he said that they are wicked. And why? Because you cannot be doing something that honors God when the same thing dishonors His Word, His nature, and His character. There's no way to bring the two together. And he says, the foolish shall not stand in thy sight. That's another reason I go to God in prayer, because there's enough foolishness in me that needs to fall. And I need to spend that time with God to make sure so that when I go in real, repetitious prayer, the foolishness in me ceases to stand. And I can walk in wisdom and in faith. He said, you'll destroy those who speak leasing, who speak falsehood. Listen, deception is deadly. Deception is deadly. And that's why we want God to destroy any deception in us. Then he says in verse 7 through 10, he talks about this. I won't go through all of it. He said, I'm going to come into your house, and I'm going to worship, and I want you to lead me in righteousness. In other words, don't be distracted by the deception. Oh, how I pray that things within me that are rebellious and that are deceptive and that are deceitful and that are sinful would be cast out and destroyed. But whether we'd all pray, Lord, free me of that which is defiling and contrary to your beauty and to your glory. Because if I'm going to reflect your glory, if I'm going to bring you glory, there can't be things in me that are glaringly deceitful or wrong or defiling. And then he says this in verse 12. He says, for thou, Lord, 11 and 12, he said, but let all those that put their trust in thee rejoice. Let them ever shout for joy, because thou defendest them. Let them also that love thy name be joyful with thee. Man, you get this theme going here of joyful and rejoicing. For thou, Lord, wilt bless the righteous with favor. Wilt thou compass him as with a shield. See, I don't want to be somebody serving the Lord who's down and distressed and depressed and stressed. I want to be the one who rejoices. I want to be one who's full of joy, knowing that the Lord does not fail me, that I can trust in Him. Now, let me quickly cover chapter 6, okay? Just like to rush through it. Take time. Here's what he says. He says, O Lord, rebuke me not in thine anger, neither chasten me in thy hot displeasure. Watch this, verse 2. Have mercy upon me, O Lord, for I am weak. I love the raw honesty of the Psalms. I mean, this, another Psalm of David, man, look at all the stuff that He's given us insight to, and joy, gladness, and look up, and spend time with God, and commune with your heart, and all this stuff. And you know what He said? He said, the truth of the matter is, I'm weak. And God, I don't need you to give me what I deserve. I need you to give me mercy. Because I am weak. O Lord, heal me, for my bones are vexed. My soul is also sore vexed. But thou, O Lord, how long? He said, have mercy upon me, for I am weak. If you've read about David's life, and even reading the Psalms that he wrote, we know this: David was not perfect. He was far from perfect. And whatever the circumstances surrounding the writing of this psalm, David's attitude in prayer becomes a good model. He did not say, Lord, give me what I deserve. He said, Lord, grant me mercy. Understand? He said, Lord, don't bless me because I got it together. Don't bless me because my devotional life is intense and on fire. Don't bless me because of my zealousness and my faithfulness. He said, bless me and have mercy on me for this reason. I am weak. I am weak. I am not enough on my own to do this. And I am in desperate need of you. Man, I like that you can be real with God. You don't have to impress God. You don't have to talk it up to God. You just be real. And this is who I am. This is what I've been like. And I failed here, and I stumbled there, and my face was in the mud there. I love that. David, he said, I'm feeling my anguish not only in my body, but in my soul. He said, my bones are vexed, but he said, my soul is vexed. And then he says, return, O Lord, and deliver my soul. Save me for thy mercy's sake. Return. The Lord didn't go anywhere. The Lord didn't go anywhere. David, if there's somebody that needs to return, make sure it's you, because the Lord is standing waiting on you to seek Him. He is not going anywhere. When we fail, we merely need to seek the Lord. Again, God was waiting on David to seek Him again. And David, he begins to rationalize, and he says in verse 5, for in death there is no remembrance of thee, and in the grave who shall give these things? He said, Lord, I don't know, maybe I'm close to dying, maybe I'm close to death. And maybe he was or was not exaggerating the situation, but what I like is he could tell God exactly what he felt. He said, I think the situation could be potentially deadly and dangerous. He said, but Lord, if I die, who's going to give me, how can I give you thanks in the grave? He said, how can I give you praise when I'm dead? And then he says in verse 6, I am weary with my groaning. All the night I make my bed to swim. I water my couch with my tears. My eye is consumed because of grief. It waxeth old because of all my enemies. He said, I'm weary. I'm crying myself to sleep. I'm full of grief. The raw emotion and the clear confession of David. I love what Charles Spurgeon did when he commented on this passage, on this psalm. When he talks about, I'm weary with my groaning. All the night I make my bed to swim. I water my couch with my tears. Mine eye is consumed because of grief. It waxeth old because of all my enemies. Charles Spurgeon said this. He said, tears. By the way, you ought to memorize this. This is great. He said, tears are liquid prayers that need no interpretation. Tears are liquid prayers that need no interpretation. That is a piece of classic commentary that we should commit to memory. Tears are liquid prayers that need no interpretation. He said, the Lord has heard the voice of my weeping, verse 8. Verse 9, the Lord hath heard my supplication. The Lord will receive my prayer. Let all mine enemies be ashamed and sore vexed. Let them return and be ashamed suddenly. He said, the Lord will hear. The Lord will receive. That's why even in the most adverse of situations, we must continue to pray, continue to ask, continue to seek, continue to knock. And he said, let all my enemies be ashamed and sore vexed. Let them return and be ashamed suddenly. Through this prayerful and powerful psalm, David said, I can envision the defeat of my foes, the defeat of my enemies. And David knows that when God receives his prayer, it means trouble for his enemy. David knows, and he sees this, and this is what I'll leave you with. He sees that his temporary agony and trouble will one day give way to permanent agony and trouble for his enemy. And for you and I, our spiritual enemy, that is so much more true than David's temporary enemies. And so may we remember also that anything we suffer and go through here for Christ's sake, is only temporary. That there is not only an eternity of joyful bliss awaiting believers, but there is an eternity of torment that awaits our spiritual adversary. He will, hold on just a second, he will pay. He will be punished for what he's done. The Bible says that one day he's going to come out, people will see him and they will look at him and they will say, is this the one? Is this the one that caused the nations to tremble? No. So why do we let him cause us to tremble now? Let us not be afraid of our adversary. Let us turn to God. Get our eyes on him. So here's where I leave you. Don't lose hope. Keep crying out to God. Know that he will hear. Continue to trust. Walk in peace. And know that God can turn any situation around. You believe that? Amen. I want us to pray first. Father, we thank you for your goodness and your grace. We thank you, Lord, for your love and your